but I want to welcome you to Problem Crushers podcast number 3. Uh, Now, what group is most likely to die from cancer? Probably not who you think it is, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But today's topic is on selecting the right employees. Our last podcast was on how to get and sort through dozens or hundreds of applicants with minimal effort. And we'll cover the last few steps in that process today. And in next Tuesday's podcast will be about the most important day in every new employee's time with you, day 1. I'm talking about how you take a random person from off the street and into your company, integrate them into your culture and motivate them to do their best job, come early, stay late, skip lunch, just because they're excited to work toward the collective vision that your company has. Tune in next time for more about that. So back to doctors. Why are doctors the group most likely to die from cancer? Professional arrogance. The idea that because they're highly educated and know all about how the body works, they figure they must know better than other doctors how to fight cancer. And so they'll try all sorts of alternative methods and things, some of which may have some value, but mostly they end up dead. And the reason I'm bringing that up today is I have not followed my own system for the last 2 employees I hired. I figured I was smart enough. I knew better because of what I knew. And I'm pretty good at reading people, so I figured I could skip through a lot of it. And turns out both of my employees just disappeared one day without notice. Everything seemed to be going okay, and then they're gone. So usually with a pattern leading up to it, whether they're late or something like that. Now, I've helped business owners hire dozens of people at this point. It's gone very well, but I just thought I could do better. But not so, my friends, not so. So what I want you to take away from that is that while every business and every situation has to adjust and tweak systems to meet their unique circumstances, and yes, we're going to learn more and gain a certain experience as we go about systematizing our businesses, it's very important to create a system, follow a tested system, if you want to avoid headaches and troubles down the road, like hiring in the same position again 6 weeks later because things just didn't work out. Many companies do okay with a stellar squad. They hire exceptional talent, best of the best, and they pay for it too. But a business that's bottled the magic of previous exceptional employees and that can work as a team will outperform a bunch of talented individuals any day, despite using average people. As the late, great management expert Edward Deming said, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Find out what you're doing, distill the magic that is you or a star employee into a system, and repeat the magic every time. And the reason I bring this up is that one of the biggest objections I run into when people say they can't hire someone to take over a certain task is that they're just too good at it and nobody else would be able to do as good a job as they can. If you want it done right, do it yourself, they say. And while it's easy to think that and it's hard to figure out how to get around it sometimes, it's just not true. I mean, at some point, we're going to die. Everyone here is going to die, or we're going to retire, or we're going to want to take a break or a vacation, or we're going to be sick, or we're going to be in the hospital. And the world's going to get along just fine without us. So if you want your company to get along just fine without you, figure out what you're doing, put it into that distilled magic system, and teach others how to do the same thing. And the wonderful thing about this is as you have more experiences and more employees, you'll have more and more of this magic stuff built into your company system. Now, we left off on our last podcast talking about what you do once you've narrowed your applicants down from 100 or several dozen to, say, 6. And before we go further into that, I want to throw out a couple more hoops you can use to narrow candidates down in case you have an unusually high number of applicants or an unusually high quality of applicants. First, once you've done the email interviews and a phone interview, if you still have a lot of people that seem great, one thing you can do is hold a seminar. Get the last dozen or dozen and a half people together, put them in a room, give a detailed presentation about your company, what you work for, what you stand for, what's expected, the culture, the position, everything. And then interview anybody who's still interested after that. You're going to turn some people off, which is great. You want to find that out now. It might be easy to feel rejected. Most business owners see their business as kind of like their baby, and it might feel like you're being personally rejected when you do a detailed presentation and 5 or 6 or a dozen of these 18 people walk out the door. But really, they're not the people you wanted anyways. You could have hired them, sure, but they weren't going to be as passionate long term as the remaining candidates. So it's okay. Another hoop, not one I've personally used, but I do know someone who has, is that you can charge for applications. If somebody has to pay a $25 application fee, they're going to have to be pretty confident that they're qualified and competent for the position. You can get rid of a lot of fluff right off the bat. If you have the credibility where you can actually do that, it's kind of funny because you can turn hiring from a short-term loss on your bottom line to a profit center while you're going through the process of hiring. The person I know of who's done this is Perry Marshall, who's a best-selling author and internet marketing expert who is so respected that in exchange for his services, people will often give him equity in their company, a percentage of ownership. Now, there's one other hoop I wanted to talk about. Let's see if I can see what it is in my notes here. I seem to have lost that one, but you got 2 things remaining at this point. The people have jumped through their hoops. They seem great. You have just a couple of candidates left. So you're left with the face-to-face interview and what I call the test. First, a few notes about the face-to-face interview. And this should apply to any interview and any interaction, honestly. Again, I suggest you set the interview time for when you want your employees to consistently show up. If they can't show up to the interview on time, they likely won't be able to show up to work on time. In some positions, this is of vital importance. In others, it really doesn't make a difference, but only you can decide how big of an impact this is and will play on your hiring process. Obviously, when we're interviewing people, we want to avoid breaking the law. A few quick guidelines, though I do recommend you talk to an attorney and not to me about this particular step in any depth. Questions about race, sex, marital status, pregnancies, religion, disabilities, etc. are a bad idea. Can't stress it enough. Avoid at all costs. But I do have some good examples of questions. For example, you can say, tell me about your last boss. Great question because it tells you how they interact with authority and it can tell you a lot about their attitude. What did you like or dislike about your boss? Describe a time you've been treated unfairly. What are your reporting requirements now? Do you consider yourself detail-oriented? Give me an example of your detail orientation. What frustrates you? What are your thoughts on qualifying a prospect, which is, a great question for a sales person, but not necessarily for an accountant. When and how large of a group have you spoken to before? How do you stay in touch with customers? How do you overcome objections, etc.? And most of these right here at this point are about how to hire a salesperson, but how do you manage your time? Can you show me your system for managing your time? Do you consider yourself good at multitasking? Have you ever prospected? What is your prospecting system? Please tell me anything more you would like me to know about you. I'm going to do a couple more here real quick from a little different vein. Have you ever been arrested? If yes, please describe the outcome and circumstances. Very important question. Have you ever been fired? Why did you leave or are you leaving your last job? Who was your supervisor and who else did you work with? In certain cases, this question is just a must. Do you have a driver's license? If they're going to be driving your vehicles, have you been involved in any auto accidents? Tell me about the references you have listed. Are you involved or have you ever been involved in any litigation? How much time did you miss from your last job? Is there anything else you'd like me to know about you? Again, just a very basic question. So there's dozens and dozens of great questions. If you want to know more, email us at inspired@hestinglen.com, and I'm sure we can hook you up with more interviewing materials. But I think you get the idea. Now, depending on the size of your company, you might want to repeat the interview process as many as 3 or more times, once with the hiring manager, once with the supervisor, and once with the owner or some available executive. If the position is of extreme importance, we're talking, this is your CEO, this is your chief operations officer, maybe this is your accountant or whoever's in charge of your bookkeeping, somebody that you have to have paramount trust in and know very well and has to have a high degree of character. I recommend that you do a day tour. Man, you really ought to have narrowed it down to 1 or 2 candidates at this point if you're going to put this level of time in with somebody. But take somebody on a tour of your company for a day. Do all the previous process that we talked about, and then give the prospect a one-on-one tour for the whole day, starting with breakfast. You talk with them over breakfast, and you take them out to lunch, and you take them out to dinner. And there's just something about 3 meals. If you sit down with somebody over meals, they just open up. And after 3 meals and after a long day, and maybe you even make it an exceptionally long that day, you can get a feel for how they respond under pressure, what kind of person they are, if you're going to enjoy working together. And frankly, most people spend more time with their coworkers than with their spouse, just because of the nature of the 8-hour workday and how things work out. So I can't stress it enough. If this person is of vital importance to your company, do as much due diligence as possible. Take them out all day, take them to 3 meals, get to know them. On the other hand, if you're hiring someone to answer the phone, this is probably excessive and should be avoided. It's just really hard for somebody to keep a facade up after 3 meals. Now, last time I talked about, it's if you feel like you've probably if you're thinking about hiring someone, you probably already should have started to. But I want to give you the corollary to that. It's never too early to start looking at hiring someone, but don't hire too quickly once you've begun the process. Slow and steady wins the race and saves you the headache of having to repeat the process again in 6 weeks when the applicant that seems so great disappears or whatever happens to you. It's really as simple as that, guys. Don't have a lot more to say, but if you have questions, email us at inspired@hestonglenn.com or leave a comment here on this Facebook page. Look forward to talking with you further on Tuesday at 3:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time about employee integration. So you found the right person. They're great. How do you make sure that that you get the best out of them and they stay with you a long time, and that you don't waste weeks or months getting someone up to speed so they can be a help and not a hindrance? That's one of the big obstacles people have with hiring is, great, I have to hire, I'm so busy. When am I going to get the time to hire? And then if I do hire someone, I'm so busy. How am I going to have the time to train them? Well, we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that next time. Looks like I might have somebody here. Is that you, Tammy? Waste weeks or months. Okay, I don't have anything more to say. I don't know if we have a question here real quick, but otherwise, I will talk to you guys next Tuesday. Thank you.